54% of American adults drink about 3 cups of coffee a day, and many studies show that students, particularly those in college, drink even more. Many people drink coffee for the morning jolt just to get on their feet, yet most of them do not know about the effects that caffeine has on your mind and body, especially in minors. Most students know that caffeine is a good kickstart to your day, but do they understand the possible risks to drinking coffee? This is a show about your mind and how common caffeinated beverages, such as coffee, are affecting your brain in ways that are favorable and maybe not so favorable. Welcome to Mind Games. Before we begin looking into these hidden effects of coffee, let's meet someone who can give us some background knowledge on the field. Please welcome world-renowned Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I'm the professor.
Interviewed by me, the student.
I'm the student.
Yep. Studies upon studies have been conducted to show the existence of links between the chemical change derived from the ingestion of caffeine and the infamous placebo effect.
Infamous? What's wrong with the placebo effect?
Stupid.
Excuse me?
Think about it. Large pharmaceutical companies spend millions researching and developing medications in attempts to improve the health of the masses, but constantly find themselves being derailed, sometimes even outperformed by nothing more than a faux pill comprised of milk, sugar, and other non-medical based components. Even worse, the placebo effect has been getting stronger.
How so?
Between 2001 and 2006, some medical companies reported medication research failures rising 20% due to failures to prove more effective than placebos. Of the drugs that make it to late-stage trials in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, 50% are eliminated due to the fact that sugar pills are just as effective. The growth of the placebo effect confounds and embarrasses many in fields aiming to aid the population. They haven't learned to control and use it to their advantage on a large scale.
I know they haven't been successful, but I can't help but wonder how this affects our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, me too.
Talk about coffee.
Fine. One study showed 6 cyclists who increased or lost speed depending on whether they believed they had regular coffee or decaffeinated coffee. The changes in their speed were small, but noticeable, which suggested that at least part of the energizing effect of coffee is purely mental. Another study, using a finger-tapping speed test to measure changes, decided to give all participants regular coffee and lied to half of them, saying that it was decaffeinated. All the participants improved in speed, and there was no significant difference between the group told it was decaffeinated and the group told it was caffeinated. The final study I've seen worked on gave half the participants caffeinated coffee and half of them decaffeinated, but told them all they had caffeine. The study found that caffeine withdrawal symptoms largely decreased even when drinking decaffeinated coffee due to subjects believing it was regular. Their bodies didn't need the coffee, but their minds thought they couldn't function without it. The study also showed that the group who believed they had caffeine but did not performed worse on reaction tests than caffeinated groups, yet stated they felt, quote, more focused and attentive, unquote. They thought the coffee was giving them benefits that, in this case, it was not. They felt, to use scientific terms, more woke than they truly were.
Wow, that sounds exactly like an experiment that we just did.
Really? What was your experiment?
Well, we started by planning our experiment with 2 groups. One of the groups was made up of our fellow classmates, and the other was made up of our friends from outside of the class. We brought each group into a room and gave some of our participants regular coffee and the others decaf. Most of our participants didn't believe us when we told them which type of coffee they had, but actually, we only told half of the group a lie. For each group, we told half of the subjects the truth and the others the opposite. Introducing the placebo effect. There were 4 groups in total. 2 groups were told the truth, but had different types of coffee, and the other 2, which had different types of were lied to about their type of coffee.
We had our participants do 2 simple tests, one which measures reaction time and one which measures finger taps. Participants did these tests before consuming coffee and afterwards.
Interesting. Did anything unexpected happen in your experiment?
Well, our experiment wasn't perfect. There were some issues. First, our sample size was not as big as we wanted it to be. Second, our deception was admittedly pretty subpar. In fact, many of our participants figured out what we were testing pretty quickly and even discussed it during the experiment.
What kind of coffee did you have?
Pretty average coffee.
Yeah, but like, was it caffeinated, decaffeinated?
Caffeinated? Of course I don't actually know that. For all I know.
So you feel suspicious of what we told you?
Yeah, maybe it was cyanide.
What do you think we were testing for?
I think you told me that I was having caffeinated coffee, but I'm actually having decaf.
Well, if you just had to take some random guess at what it was, what would you say?
My original guess was that you guys were lying to us about what kind of coffee we drink, and basically we all drink decaf, and you were testing for placebo.
So now that your experiment's concluded, could I see what results it yielded?
Sure, but our data's kind of unexpected. You know what? Here, take a look.
In order to understand our data, we must first combine our 4 groups into 2 groups in 2 separate ways. We do this by comparing what coffee we gave people to what coffee we told people they had. For the coffee giving category, we have the 2 groups of caffeinated and decaffeinated. Our data tells us that, on average, the participants who were given caffeine performed much better on both the click test and the reaction time test. This is something that we would expect from the experiment, as is furthering evidence that caffeine is a stimulating drug that can produce these effects. However, with p-values of 0.1 and 0.13 for the click and reaction time tests respectively, there is not enough evidence to show the given coffee truly had an effect on the performances of the students since the p-values are so high. The interesting part of our data comes when we look at the second group, the coffee told category, in which we look at what we told the participants and not what we gave them. We mainly look at this category because it contains our placebo effect groups. Our findings show that for the click difference test, there was barely a difference between the told caffeinated and told decaffeinated groups, as the caffeine groups performed only 0.5 clicks better. However, the most confounding data comes from the reaction test, where the told decaf group actually performed better on the reaction test than the told caffeinated group. Well, how can this be? Like the given groups, we would expect the groups that were told they had caffeinated coffee to perform better, even if they didn't have caffeinated coffee. Had this happened, it would have proven our alternative hypothesis, that the placebo effect could override the effects of caffeine and decaffeinated coffee. However, with p-values of 0.55 and 0.93 for the click test and reaction test respectively, we can, like the given coffee groups, see that our data is inconclusive in determining the true effects of the placebo with respect to coffee and speed.
Well, while there's no conclusive evidence of the placebo effect from your experiment, it doesn't mean your data is useless. There could still be some important takeaways, right?
Well, I guess. I mean, the fact that we didn't experience the placebo effect like we had hoped, it might be evidence that the placebo effect and caffeine are actually not linked, and that the power of caffeine is stronger in the end, not really the power of the mind.
Coffee serves many purposes for most Americans today, delivering the morning jolt that most people require to go about their lives and becoming a household staple in the process. Through these studies, we found that while caffeine does serve the purpose that most people desire, the impact of those effects may not be as significant as when we first predicted. We saw that, even though there was small enough evidence to prove it, the people actually given caffeine did perform slightly better on all tests, and the trend was in the direction we would expect from people who have taken caffeinated coffee before. However, because of our extraneous data, it is clear that the placebo effect is not as strong when it comes to caffeine. What does this mean for society moving forward? What are the true effects of caffeine compared to what our mind thinks they are? Can you actually truly tell whether or not coffee is caffeinated or not, and does it have an effect on your performance?